WebcastOneLive.com, the Legislative Hour with your hosts, Art Smith and Kevin Hall.
And good afternoon, and welcome to the Iowa Legislative Hour. I am Kevin Hall. Great to have you with us this week. This is our weekly segment where we chat with Iowa legislators about what is going on at the state capitol. Joining me, as always, my esteemed co-host, Art Smith. Art, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Kevin. You know, I was really disappointed yesterday. I was disappointed when I was listening on the radio to what was going on in Rome and Vatican City with this election of a pope, and the pope came out and they had to stop and figure out what they were saying in Latin.
Right.
And then once they announced his name, I was disappointed that it wasn't Kevin Hall.
Yeah.
But at any rate, it was an exciting day for folks across the world, Catholics, non-Catholics alike. I think a lot of people were really enthused about what occurred. Doesn't have anything to do with what we're going to talk about today, but
no, totally off topic. That's a great way to start the show.
Absolutely.
We're off to a flying start. Our special guests this week, two freshman senators, both Republicans from Adel. We have Senator Jake Chapman. Jake, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be with you, Kevin and Art.
And from West Des Moines, Senator Charles Schneider. Gentlemen, glad to have you both here.
Thanks for having us.
So, since you're both brand new to the Capitol, Jake, I'll ask you first, because you had kind of a long campaign, had to deal with a primary, didn't have an opponent in the general election. And now that you've been in the legislature for 2 months or so, is it everything and more that you hoped it would be, or has it been the most frustrating 2 months of your life?
Oh, it's both. There's no doubt it's both. It's a privilege and really an honor to be able to represent Iowans down at the state capitol. But as you know, being in the minority can be frustrating. We had some good bills that unfortunately didn't make it through funnel week, and that's a little frustrating. Iowans have elected me to represent them, and unfortunately, those ideals haven't been represented in the bills we proposed. But we're going to continue to fight, and we're going to continue to do what Iowans want us to do down there.
And tell us about your district a little bit. You got a little sliver of Polk County, then all of Dallas County, all of Adair, I believe.
Yeah, actually, I represent 5 counties.
5 counties, wow.
I represent Polk City and Polk County. Most of Dallas County. Charles represents a good portion of Dallas as well, but most of Dallas excluding Waukee and West Des Moines area. Then I continue out west to Guthrie County, Adair County, and the northeast corner of Cass County. So it's quite large district with both urban and rural constituents.
Very diverse.
Yeah, it's very diverse with a lot of different issues to deal with. So that's been a little bit of a learning curve for me, being able to represent both sets of constituents.
And Senator Schneider, Senate District 22, which you won in a special election, of course, the seat that opened up due to Pat Ward's unfortunate passing. What has it been like for you in the legislature the first 8 weeks or so?
It's just been a whirlwind. It's a place I didn't anticipate being 4 or 5 months ago whenever Senator Ward unfortunately passed away. So I'm still just trying to let things soak in. And I've noticed a few things like Jake has. One is it's very hard to it's impossible to set the agenda if you don't have the majority.
Right.
And that's why the parties fight so hard to get the majority in either chamber. Another thing I've noticed is that the place can almost be, you would think that when you go there, you know everything that's going on and you're always in the know about every single issue. But really, to me, and I don't know if you feel the same way, Jake, but it's almost like a bubble. And you tend to get isolated and focus on certain things, and you really have to make an effort, I think, to get outside and talk to people and make sure you're going to meetings and staying in touch with constituents to know what's going on and what their concerns are and what their impressions are of what's going on in the Capitol.
Of course, you served on the West Des Moines City Council. Compare the two. Now, obviously, as you mentioned, since you're in the 26-24 minority in the Iowa Senate, it's hard to get a lot of good legislation that you want passed. Compare that to the process in the West Des Moines City Council.
It's a lot different. I already mentioned that it's hard or impossible to set the agenda, whereas on the City Council, I was only one of 5 people. I chaired our Finance Committee, and I was on our Public Safety Committee. So it was relatively easy for me to put something on the agenda and advance it to the full council to get something done. And it's also harder just to get things done because you have more people that you have to get involved in the process. You have 2 chambers, and then you've got an executive branch as well that you need to have on board to sign something if you get it passed. So it's much more difficult than just getting 3 people to go along with you on an issue that would come up at the city council.
All right, you have a question for the gentleman?
Well, everything that you're saying makes a lot of sense, and I'm intrigued by it. I'm curious when you guys go home. You're some of the lucky ones. You don't have to stay here all week and then go home on Friday or whatever. You get to go home every night. When you go home at night, do you since you've been in office, how many times have you had to remind your family that your title is senator? I'm just curious. Is that a point of contention? Is your wife, anyway, but seriously, it's, do you find, kind of along the lines of what you were just talking about, do you find that what you end up really talking about even in caucus are things that are more generally already in front of the public as an issue that's kind of well represented and more widely discussed, like gun control or taxation or any of those types of items, versus an issue that's really specific to your constituents or towards your own perspective? I mean, how do you see that happening?
I would say generally the issues that we talk about in caucus, at least this session, we seem to have been very focused on 3 main priorities: education reform, property tax reform, and being fiscally responsible with the budget.
Yep.
And that's generally most of the conversation that we have on issues that relate to those topics. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, I agree. Charles made the point that the Democrats drive the agenda.
Yeah.
And so when we're dealing with bills, it's most of the time it's how can we make sure this doesn't get done? And so there is some benefit to having a difficult process for bills to come forward. I think there's some benefit to that. If there wasn't, I think Iowa would be in a much different situation. I'm sure we're going to be able to talk some about the budget, but the Democrats have proposed an outrageous budget, and that if that were to pass, we'd be putting more debt on Iowans, and so it's good that there is a process that is difficult. But most of the time, I agree with Charles. We're discussing issues that are fiscal issues and education issues, some healthcare issues, as we face how Iowa's going to go down the road of Medicaid expansion or Healthy Iowa. So those are the topics I think that we primarily focus on.
You're watching the Iowa Legislative Hour on Webcast One Live. If you'd like to join the conversation, please feel free to do so. The phone number is 855-244-0077. Senator Chapman, since you mentioned the budget, let's head there for a little bit. The Democrats claim that their budget comes in at only 94% of revenue. Explain to us why that is a fallacy.
Yeah, that is absolutely just inaccurate. What they're basing that off of is the fact that the 99% rule has to do with all available revenues. That is the one-time money that we have, this $700 million in surplus money. We happen to think it's over collection of tax dollars.
Right.
And so they're using that, and in fact, they would use half of that money in 1 year. It's an 11
for new spending.
For new spending and spending that requires ongoing revenue. And to me, that is extremely disappointing. Those who will learn nothing from history are doomed to repeat it. And it was 3 years ago, just 3 years ago, under the Culver administration, that they did exactly that.
Right.
They were spending more than what they were taking in. We had a $1 billion spending gap, and it resulted in a 10% across-the-board cut. And here we are 3 years later with them proposing the same sort of budget. That is very frustrating and disappointing to see Democrats going down that same path.
A lot of people have different ideas about what to do with this budget surplus or over-collection of taxes. Senator Schneider, if it was up to you, what do you think should be done with the $800 or so million?
Well, one thing we've proposed in the Senate, and I know the House Republicans have done the same, is to propose a tax credit for every taxpayer with tax liability. And the reality is that's not going to pass. It just won't get brought up in the state Senate. It did pass the House yesterday as a part of their budget bill, but it's not going anywhere. So I think we also need to start thinking about what also might be hopefully acceptable to Democrats. A couple of things we could do. One is shore up some of the gap in the IPERS funding liability. Mm-hmm. Another thing is we could pay off a series of iJobs bonds that we're only paying interest on right now. That would free up, well, we couldn't pay them off yet, but we can what's called defease them. We can set up a defeasance account and thereby free up some revenue to go into the general fund and then pay off the bonds once they become callable. And that takes that liability off our books, and I think would be a good deal for taxpayers in the long run.
And that's something Auditor Valt has proposed, is using some of the $800 million to pay down some of the state's debts. Senator Chapman, if the decision was up to you on what to do with the budget surplus, what would you do with it?
Yeah, first of all, this is taxpayer money. This is not government's money. This is not our money. This is money that taxpayers paid into the system. And so our number one priority would be to be able to give that money back. I would like to see us, I think we're in a great position to be able to leverage that money and to reduce income tax, property tax. If the Democrats aren't willing to allow us to give the money directly back to the taxpayer, let's leverage that money to be able to give it back to them in a different form, in tax relief. Mm-hmm. And so that would be my number one priority in this extra money.
Do we think, I don't know if there's been any polling on this or not, but do we think that the majority of Iowans would like to get the extra money back? I mean, I guess where I'm coming from with that is there something that Iowans can do, whether they're Democrats or Republicans or independents, to influence their representatives of either party to actually pass that? I mean, it just doesn't make any, to me, it doesn't make it's difficult for me to believe that all the Democrats are going to vote against this when their own constituents are telling them they want it. That's the thing that I think is, if we could somehow get people to recognize what's happening and get to their representatives in the Senate, that might.
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, that always helps. Communicating with your legislators always helps. So, yeah, if there are any people listening out there who live in areas that are represented by Democrats, then I'd urge them to call, email, stop by the Capitol.
Yeah.
And do whatever you can to get this issue in front of them.
Okay.
Of course, we mentioned the House bill. They passed that idea yesterday, and Representative Peter County of West Des Moines, who I believe is one of your constituents, is he not?
He's not,
He's
actually.
not, okay.
No.
Even
Chris Hagenow and Rob Taylor.
Okay. But he's basically saying any extra money not spent should go back to the taxpayers, basically what you gentlemen are arguing for. The House also passed, they want a 4.5% optional flat tax. They would have no deductions, but it would lower the taxes for an estimated 500,000 Iowans. What do you think about that? A 4.5% optional flat tax. If you don't like that, you can go with the plan as it is right now.
I think that's the key, too. I think it's going to be very difficult for Democrats to argue against this plan when they have the option.
But they are.
Well, they are, but they need to listen to their constituents. Mm-hmm. When we have a 9 tax bracket system, 8.98% being the highest tax bracket for those making roughly $64,000 or more, that impacts Iowans.
Yep.
And we can see we're collecting too much taxes to begin with. Let's create a flat tax. Let's allow the option, if you want to take the flat tax, reduce some of the deductions that you can take. Let's give more money back to hardworking Iowans. That sparks economic growth, as we know.
Yep.
And so I'm very supportive of the flat tax idea. I think it's a great idea, and I hope that Republicans in the Senate will get the opportunity to vote on that legislation.
Of course, that passed on strictly party lines in the Iowa House, and it sounds like a great idea, but all the Democrats voted against it. It also would raise the filing threshold, so for a single tax earner or taxpayer, the first $6,235 you make, you're not taxed on. For married couples, it would be $12,450. Senator Schneider, your thoughts on a 4.5% optional flat tax?
I like the idea. I think it's good that it be optional, like Jake said. And there are other ways we could look at trying to provide property tax relief, or not just property tax relief to people too. There are advocates out there right now for the so-called fair tax as well. I'd like to study that one too and look at all the options on the table and find something that we can provide that's going to reflect today's economy and also is going to keep more money in people's pockets.
So Senator Whitver's proposal to do some research on eliminating the income tax, what are your thoughts about that?
Let's look at it. Absolutely. It's worked well in Texas. There are other states that are thinking about moving in that direction. Louisiana, Nebraska has talked. Their governor proposed it. I don't think it's going anywhere this session there from what I saw the last time I looked into it a week or so ago. But yeah, we definitely need to look at that. And one of the reasons why is because we have so many people leaving this state when they retire. Yeah. And part of the reason they leave is because of the income tax. And if we're able to keep those people here, we're also able to keep more money here. And there are more generational transfers of wealth to Iowans here, more investment in nonprofit and community organizations. So I think it's something we definitely ought to take a hard look at.
Senator Chapman, abolishing the income tax, your thoughts?
Great idea. It's a great idea. And, as you know, the majority of jobs created in this country have been created in those states that don't have income tax. So if we want to be serious about job creation, creating an environment where my kids can stay here and pursue the job career that they would like, let's take a hard look at it and let's figure out a way to phase the income tax out of the state and again put more money back into hardworking Iowans' hands.
Of course, the funnel deadline came and went last week. That basically meant, for the most part, with some exceptions, any bill that did not pass out of committee had basically died for the year. Were there any bills in particular, Senator Schneider, we'll start with you, any bills in particular that you were upset with that did not make it out of the funnel?
Well, it would have been nice to have had an opportunity to vote on the tax credit that we propose as a caucus. There are others out there too. Nothing's just jumping to the top of my head, but there are a lot of good bills out there that I know a lot of people campaigned on and found a lot of popular support on. Voter ID, as an example, is another one. That it would have been nice to have had an opportunity to at least have a debate on the Senate floor, even if we know it's not going to go anywhere. Let's at least have the conversation.
Right. Senator Chapman, same question.
Yeah, while these bills may be quote unquote dead, we can still use them as amendments, and so we still look for vehicles or bills that we might be able to attach these other bills onto. Voter ID is a great example of that. The traffic cameras, another one that I'm very supportive of eliminating the traffic cameras. There's a number with income tax reduction, for example. Now, some of those are funnel proof, such as the tax being in Ways and Means, but we're always looking at ways to get rid of red light cameras and what have you.
Let's talk about voter ID a little bit, because I know it's a popular topic with you. Of course, the Register poll a month or so ago, 71% of Iowans favor having to show some form of photo ID when you go to the polls. It makes sense to the vast majority of Iowans. Why does it not make any sense to Democrats?
That's a good question. I just recently signed up to be a T-ball coach for my son. This is his first year being in T-ball. And guess what? I had to show my driver's license to be a T-ball coach. Imagine that. If it's good enough for a T-ball coach, it's certainly good enough for our voters to ensure that we have a protected election. And we just saw some concerns over in was it
Lynn County?
Lynn County. They want to argue that there's no fraud. There's no such thing as fraud. Baloney. And if you really feel that way, why not ensure that our elections are protected and that we're making sure that those that are here and able to vote are voting, and those that shouldn't be voting aren't. I just don't understand why this is a losing issue for Democrats, frankly. It's a losing issue. Iowans are on board with it, and it's time we enact the legislation. So hopefully Democrats will start listening to their constituents.
Yep.
Senator Schneider, if you left our studios after the show, stopped by the grocery store on the way home, decided to pick your wife up a nice bottle of wine for dinner, you would have to show a photo ID before you could buy that at the grocery store. Is, buying alcohol, is that more important than someone's vote? I mean, isn't that, pretty much the most important thing we can do as citizens?
Voting is the most important fundamental right that we have as U.S. citizens. Mm-hmm. It's how we survive and last as a democracy and or a republic. And one of the arguments the Democrats use, to go back to your other question, is that it's voter suppression. That's not what this is about. This is about making sure that everyone knows that the process we have that's fundamental to us as citizens is fair. Mm-hmm. That's all this is about. Giving ID cards to people at no cost does nothing to inhibit or prohibit them from going to vote. It doesn't do anything to prohibit or dissuade or deter any legal U.S. citizen who has a right to vote.
Surveys have shown in Georgia from the 2006 midterm elections to 2010, after they enacted a voter ID law, the turnout went up among minorities and from white voters. There's no evidence that voter ID suppresses votes. There is zero evidence. There is widespread evidence that voter fraud takes place. There was a situation in Lynn County, Jake, you referred to it. A woman allegedly went in to vote in their special election for the casino there and said she was someone else. We know there have been at least 6 cases of allegedly people who are not eligible to vote here in Iowa casting votes. There's a woman in Ohio who was just indicted for voting 6 times, and she was a poll worker, voted 6 times to help Barack Obama get elected in Ohio, in one of the most important states. So it's obviously voter fraud is going on. We don't know how widespread it is.
Well, and what's amusing about the argument of it's not really going on that much is there's no good way to know whether it's going on that much, because we don't have controls in place to prevent it. We don't have anybody monitoring it and taking statistics to figure out how much it's really happening. This is something that could and probably is going on to a much larger extent than anybody realizes, and people just want to ignore it because they don't want to deal with it, and I believe there's some people that sincerely feel that way, or because they know it provides their party an advantage.
It would be very, very easy to do, particularly if you live in a large district, if you live in Des Moines or Johnston or Urbandale, somewhere like that, and if you go in there and say you're so-and-so, they'll just hand you a ballot. You can go in and vote. And if that person doesn't vote, there is no way to find out if that was a legitimate vote or not.
Really, all you got to do is if you know a few people in your neighborhood, say, hey, Bob, are you planning to vote? He's like, nah, I don't. No point in it. Okay, just curious, no big deal. You could collect 3 or 4 or 5 names that way, and before you know it, all you got to, it doesn't mean that the poll workers aren't watching,
right?
And wouldn't say, you can't just vote and then tell me you're somebody else 5 minutes later. So there's got to be some planning around it and bring people in from another precinct to actually execute on the voting. But it's not that hard.
Yeah, those poll watchers just don't have the resources, the tools to be able to catch the fraud. And we've had some close elections.
Very.
You look at Representative Hagenow.
22 votes.
22 votes. Don't we want to ensure that election was held fairly and that there was no fraud involved?
Yep.
These elections, people say, well, my vote doesn't matter. 22 votes in that election. And so certainly it matters. And these elections are getting closer and closer and closer. And so we need to make sure that these are legitimate voters.
Well, we've had Senator Mark Shelgren in here a couple of times. His election came down to 10 votes. It's, every vote counts.
Yep.
All right.
So, hey,
our voter ID filibuster is over.
There you go. You're listening to the Iowa Legislative Hour, and I'm Art Smith with Kevin Hall, and we've got Senators Jake Chapman and Charles Snyder with us today. We have phone lines open at what number?
855-244-0077.
And we'll be back in a few minutes.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
If you choose to obey the power of sin, it leads to death. If you choose to obey obedience, it leads to righteousness.
Forgiveness is just the beginning of life in Christ. God wants us to live for Him now.
And because of Jesus Christ, the gospel was preached, and you and I are blessed today because of Abraham. Did you know that? We're blessed.
Experience Truth, 99.3 FM.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
Fight the good fight on a Rebels Cause Radio, Thursday evenings at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on a rebelscause.com. A Rebels Cause Radio is edutainment.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
The only way we come to know the Saviorship of Jesus Christ is by bowing and acknowledging that He is Lord and King over all the earth.
Jesus Christ died on a cross, paid the penalty for our sin, and by repenting of our sin and accepting Him by faith, what He did for us, we are forgiven.
Salvation is not a combination of faith and works. Salvation is by faith alone in God.
Experience Truth, 99.3 FM.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
We'll do that. Sounds good. And we're back from our break. This is Art Smith and Kevin Hall with the Iowa Legislative Hour. We have Senators Jake Chapman from Adel and Senator Charles Snyder from West Des Moines. He used to be my city councilman, actually. I still remember the day you walked through our neighborhood.
I remember that too.
And shook hands, and I gave you grief about deer.
I remember that too.
So I've been watching the politics for a while now. Probably most of my life, but I've really had a focus on things that are going on.
And that goes back to what, the Lincoln era?
Yes, or whatever. Which Lincoln? And I've noticed just in the last 5, 6, 7 years, there's been a lot of it just in terms of public dialogue. There's been a lot of breakdown in just how people interact with each other, and some meanness and angst to an extreme extent in some cases. And but the thing I've noticed recently is that there seems to be more loss of decorum in places where decorum has been a point of pride, such as in our Iowa State House. And this past week, we've had a couple of situations where there's been some heated discussion on the floor of the Senate. And I know you guys were there when this was going on. I think we have a picture of from one of those. We got an electronic.
There it is.
Okay, so there's everybody getting together at the well to.
That's from the Des Moines Register.
Yeah. So we'll give credit to the Register for that. And so, in this situation, there was some discussion related to the deal with the
the fertilizer plant in Lee County, and this happened just yesterday.
Yep.
And of course, Debbie Durham, Governor Branstad's leader of the Department of Economic Development, had been in front of the Senate, I believe, last week. And Governor Branstad wasn't happy about the way she was treated, and there was discussion about that on the Senate floor. Brad Zahn, who's a frequent guest here, kind of expressed some dissatisfaction with what the Democrats were saying. Jake, you were there. Can you kind of give us a breakdown of what all happened and
well, sure.
what it was like watching it?
Yeah, it was a new experience for me, that's for sure. But basically, the Democrats wanted to stand up and talk about how terrible Governor Branstad is, how he's a liar, and basically just completely inaccurate with their statements. And
when he wasn't there to defend himself, he was out of the state yesterday.
And so Senator Zahn stood up and did a point of order, and we were called down to the well. And that was the picture that was seen. And, a couple days previous to that occasion, Senator Black wanted to criticize Republicans for having too many people in the well. Well, I'm sorry, but we vote on Senate rules, and nowhere in the rules does it prohibit Republicans from coming down to argue their case.
Yep.
And so it is disappointing to see that kind of dialogue occurring during point of personal privilege on the Senate floor. It's political posturing. It's frankly just disappointing that it's occurring in our state house.
Senator Schneider, your thoughts on the dust-up, particularly the one yesterday over where they were criticizing both Debbie Durham and Governor Branstad?
Yeah, like Jake, I was disappointed in how it all played out, and I also would prefer to see a better decorum in the Senate. I'd like to see us behave more like people would expect their state senators to behave when they're representing them in the state capitol. And I think the credit of those of us in the Republican caucus, I can't think of any instance where we've had anyone from our caucus get up during the points of personal privilege in the morning and bash someone from the other side for anything they've said or done. And so I think we've done a good job of maintaining proper decorum, and hopefully cooler heads will prevail going forward here, and we'll all act more like adults.
Now, this fertilizer plant in Lee County, it is a controversial issue. We had Senator Shelgren in here last week. He doesn't think the state should be giving tax credits away to recruit businesses here. When we have existing Iowa businesses who aren't getting the same favored treatment. A lot of people think we gave away too much to get this plant here. Senator Chapman, I'll start with you. What do you think about what the state did to try to lure this company, which it's an Egyptian company, Orascom, to build this fertilizer plant in Lee County, where they have very high unemployment, 9.1%, the highest in the state. Governor Branstad argues it'll pay for itself in jobs and economic development and whatnot. What's your take on that situation?
Well, first of all, it's interesting that they point out that it is an Egyptian company and that is somehow a bad thing. These are the same people that are upset that our jobs are going to China, but as soon as a foreign company invests in our state, they're upset. I don't get it.
That is interesting.
It's very interesting. But here's the reality. Do I like doing tax credits for a specific industry or a specific business? No, I don't. I don't like picking winners, whether it be the technology industry or healthcare industry. But here's the reality in our state. We have an unfair competitive state. We have the highest corporate tax rate in the United States, 12%. We have high commercial property tax. And so really the only thing we have as a tool in the state is tax credits. And if we don't use tax credits because of our climate, we're not going to be able to attract businesses. And so Debbie Durham was well within her rights and what the legislature has outlined as to what she can do with tax credits. She was well within that. I think it's going to be good for Lee County. It's going to benefit those folks down there with jobs and opportunity. This is a company that employs roughly 80,000 people worldwide. So overall, no, I don't like using tax credits, but it's the tool we have right now. And until we address commercial property, and income tax and corporate tax, that's the tool we have, and that's what we have to use.
And Senator Schneider, same question. And is this a situation you've dealt with as a city councilman as well, trying to lure businesses to West Des Moines?
We haven't dealt with tax credits at the city level before. That's not a power we have. In cities, you use typically, at least we would use tax increment financing and that tool to try and help bring businesses here so we can provide the infrastructure necessary to accommodate them. One of the arguments that the Democrats have been making about the Orascom deal is that we gave away too much in tax credits. Well, if that's the case, tell us what the magic number was.
Right.
That's one thing they haven't told us. What was the magic number? What was the bare minimum that we needed to give away to get them here? We haven't been told that, and they haven't presented any evidence to buttress any kind of specific number that would be that magic number.
Well, it's funny because liberals love to attack the Koch brothers, who are big, ultra-rich conservatives who spend a lot of money giving to conservative causes and candidates. And Governor Branstad, when he was in Lee County last week, he was asked about this, and he got a little heated, and he was questioned about the Koch brothers being against this deal. And his argument is, well, the Koch brothers are in competition with this plant in Lee County because they're over in Illinois. And, Governor Branstad is saying the fertilizer plant having it here will save farmers a lot of money as well. So, there's a lot of different variables going into this argument. I don't think it's a black and white issue at all.
Well, it will save farmers money, and that's why another fertilizer plant is being built up in Sioux City as well, is because this is something that our farmers need to keep costs down.
Sure. So just in terms of economic development, what's a good model? Just to attract in general, to attract businesses to Iowa, is it just cutting the corporate tax? Is it providing across the board incentives? What's really the right way for us to attract business and keep business operating effectively here in Iowa? Well,
I happen to be in a family business. I'm the chief operating officer for one of those companies that we own. There's several factors that go into it. We've talked about the tax climate, and that is a huge factor. When I can jump over to another state or a couple states over and have that tax liability reduced, that's a big factor. We're trying to provide a service or a product at a fair and competitive rate, and so you have to look at what your overhead costs are. But another factor that we've talked a lot about this session is our availability of skilled workforce. And you have to have the employees available to be able to fill the positions that you need. And so, the STEM initiative and some of these other initiatives we have to help match up our students with employers and what they're expecting and needing in the future is also important. And, we've kind of fallen behind in some of our education. Rather, other states have passed us by. Our test scores are actually kind of maintaining, but we need to make sure we have the workforce also available in the state to be able to be competitively, in the workplace.
Senator Schneider, commercial property tax reform. All 100 all 100 House members, all 50 senators, Democrats and Republicans, they all say they're for it. And, we've been trying to get it through the legislature for a couple of years now. Is this a year, or is it going to stall like it has in previous years?
I really don't know. I really have no idea. Right now it seems very similar to last year in terms of the Democrats in the Senate wanting a tax credit plan that's limited in scale, and the Republicans wanting a rollback, although this year it's less of a rollback. And the governor's plan this year also ties all three classes of property together and helps ensure that property tax rates on those classes of property don't rise too quickly. So I think the governor's plan has come closer to maybe what the Democrats would like. I don't know that the Democrats have really given in all that much or moved any closer to where the governor is. So I really don't know where it's going to end up at the end of the day.
Jake, same question. Are they finally going to get something done with commercial property tax reform?
I would hope so. We've had this discussion for several years now. We've heard from our business owners that this is an issue. It's one of the top issues for business in this state. And again, if Democrats are serious about having true economic growth, if they want to reduce some of the tax credits that we're having to give out to fertilizer plants, they'll get serious about property tax. And as Charles mentioned, having another tax credit for property tax, it's laughable. It really is. You have to have 4% growth a year to get an extra $50 million into the pot.
And it's capped at 250.
And it's capped. So let's get serious about property tax reform. And I think the governor has come a long way in his proposal. Went from a 40% rollback to a 20% now. I think that's something that Democrats could live with. We're fully funding any backfill that cities or counties are going to lose out on. And just this last week, we saw a number of cities and counties support the tax reform. So you have cities and counties on board with this as well, and I think as they learn the details of it, they're going to continue to support the governor's proposal.
This is the Iowa Legislative Hour. Kevin Hall along with Art Smith and our guests, State Senators Jake Chapman and Charles Schneider. We're going to take a break. We're going to talk about Second Amendment issues and a lot more when we continue. You're watching Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershad.
I'm administrative manager.
I'm the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
If we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, it's got to be, it's your home.
It's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're going to do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's going to be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're going to do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed rider it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
If you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you going to say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're going to be listening. They're going to want to know what your challenges are. Then they're going to come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? You can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me, but is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going though. I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm going to take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
fixed rider, it's free or 100% money back.
Enough said.
Welcome back to the Iowa Legislative Hour. Kevin Hall along with my co-host Art Smith and State Senators, freshman Republican Senators, Jake Chapman and Charles Schneider. We got about 16 minutes or so left. I want to talk about the Second Amendment and an amendment to, I believe it's an amendment to the education bill proposed by Senator Kent Sorensen of Milo. This would allow school employees who do have permits to carry firearms on school grounds. Senator Chapman, I know you're a big Second Amendment guy. What are your thoughts on this amendment?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the Second Amendment, just because you're a teacher or a doctor, just because you go into those professions, doesn't limit your Second Amendment right. With that said, I've talked to a lot of folks about this issue, and I think most folks are okay with teachers carrying firearms, but they would like to see some sort of training component to it, some proficiency testing to make sure that we're teaching these teachers specific types of scenarios, making sure that they understand, play through those scenarios. This isn't like just going out and shooting at a shooting range. These are different types of situations where you have mass amount of people with an active shooter. But I feel more comfortable as a parent with one child in school and a few more coming up to have teachers to have that ability to protect my kids. We're sending our kids to school, and it's sad that we have to be concerned as parents of the safety of our kids in schools. And we have to have an ability to combat that. As you know, it doesn't take long to fire a firearm. And to solely rely on police force and specialty forces is not just it's not a viable option.
Right.
It takes time for those people to get to that type of situation. And so, me personally, I'm in favor of having some protection within the schools. Some way to fight back.
Now, I'm just thinking about back to my school years, and I had some crazy teachers. My fifth grade teacher, apparently she saw some student during lunch or whatever flip the bird to another student. So she stood there for 5 minutes flipping off the entire classroom. A bunch of fifth graders. She's like, "What is this? This doesn't mean anything." And we're all rolling in the seats because it's the funniest thing we've ever seen.
That's a good way to
True
lose
story.
control.
True story.
Wow.
My high school, there was a shooting in my high school. It wasn't fatal, but it was a personal issue between two guys. And, I don't know. I'm a big Second Amendment guy as well, but I have issues with, I worry about, a 60-year-old math teacher, female math teacher, being overpowered by a big 17-year-old kid trying to get the gun away. Or, I mean, there's... to me, it's a touchy issue, arming teachers. I am all in favor of I think we should have a police officer in every school, frankly. Yeah. I think it's gotten to that point in our society. Senator Schneider, what do you think about this whole issue?
Yeah, this is an issue that, as you know, my campaign process was very abbreviated, and it's not an issue that was brought up on the campaign trail, and I tend to typically want to take a lot of time to think through issues before coming to a final decision. I'm a believer in the Second Amendment. The NRA gave me their endorsement during my campaign. But there are those issues that you mentioned. So I want to make sure that if we move in that direction, I'm getting input from school board members, school district superintendents, the NRA, Iowa Firearms Coalition, and parents of students as well. Bottom line is we need to make sure that our kids are safe.
Right.
Yep.
And that's really what we're trying to get to, because there are some scary things going on in the world these days, and they're happening too frequently. The reality is we just need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep these kids safe.
So along the lines of gun law, this last Sunday, Des Moines Register had a pretty lengthy set of articles in the main section of the paper. I think they covered like the front page and then 4 or 5 or 6 pages inside, just talking about 2 years after the shall carry law was passed by the legislature, what's the impact been? How easy or harder has it been for folks to acquire a permit to carry? How much concern has it raised for the sheriffs who have to actually approve or deny those permits? There was a lot of interesting information in there, but probably, and I would encourage anybody. I mean, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the Des Moines Register, but I actually think that a lot of the material that was written was well done. and it was well researched. What I came away with from that, and which I agree with, I have a permit to carry. Probably the most amazing thing about getting a permit to carry right now is that you can technically get that permit after having watched a 20-minute video and take a 10-minute online test and not have ever handled a gun, not have had anybody interact with you to verify that you know what you really comprehend from it. And I'm not saying that the law, you know, what we did was a bad thing. I actually think the direction we took was very, very good. But most people that I know who are permit carriers and, you know, NRA members and very respectful of the Second Amendment and the law have kind of the same opinion, is that we need to make sure that we have good training, whether we have permits or not, whether it's, you know, legislatively driven or not. People just shouldn't be carrying a weapon that they don't understand how it works, you know, what have thought about when they might have to use it. I mean, I would never ever want to actually discharge I would never want to shoot a person. Never. I don't ever want to do that. Mm-hmm. But I feel a lot better knowing that I'm in a position to protect my wife or friends or family, or just people in general if a situation arises where the need to do that exists. But I want the training to deal with that. And I think that's probably the biggest issue that should be before us, whether it's about the schools or whether it's about the public in general, is what we're doing about the training aspect behind this. Your thoughts about that?
You know, I couldn't agree more. I think most people that are getting permits to carry want to be safe with those firearms, want the training. I have some reservation in saying we should just mandate that they go through a training course. The reality is, if I'm not carrying a firearm and an active shooter were to come in here right now, Art, I'd rather you have a gun and have some chance of firing that gun, because reality is I probably don't have a chance.
Yep.
And so even though you might not have dealt with that firearm before, I'd rather have a slim chance of you being able to defend yourself and myself. And so, you know, as I said, I'm a big Second Amendment guy. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Right. Yep.
And so I think we have to be careful with that, because Senator Schneider, myself, and all other elected officials took an oath to uphold the Constitution of Iowa and of the United States. Yep. And so we have to make sure we're upholding our oath as well. And but I absolutely agree. We want the training, and I think most responsible people out there that are carrying firearms are probably doing some sort of training. I would hope that's what they're doing.
Should people have to get a permit though to carry a gun?
Well, that's up for debate. But I think there is a movement to say we're a carry state where you're able to just carry without. You know, part of the concern, and there's a bill that's addressing that, to keep those records private. We've seen some media release the names and addresses of those that have permits to carry.
And the sheriff's office in Johnson County released it to the University of Iowa, if I remember that story correctly.
That's right. And, you know, that empowers criminals to an extent. They know which homes have permits and which don't. And so, you know, we need to keep that private. But if we didn't have the permit, we wouldn't have to worry at all about that being a public record.
And the interesting thing about that is that the permit doesn't necessarily tell them who has weapons in the house or not, but it's certainly a pretty good indication.
You bet.
And you know, there's different feelings about whether it's going to impact those guns being stolen and then used in a crime, or if it's going to be a means by which criminals would avoid that home and taking any action again and going for the home that doesn't have a permit in it.
Sure.
So I think the latter is probably the more likely to happen.
I do too.
So
we got about 6 minutes or so left. I want to touch on education reform a little bit, and of course it's a huge issue, as well as a huge amount of the state budget. It takes up about 60% of the state budget. What's going to happen with education reform? The House has passed 4% allowable growth. The Senate has passed 4% allowable growth. The House has passed 2%. Obviously, if you're a superintendent, you're hoping for the 4%. Any prognostications on if this is going to get done this year?
Well,
maybe I should say, is anything meaningful going to get done this year?
Again, I don't know. Senator Cornbach will most likely do a strike after amendment that has come over, the bill that has come over from the House, and he'll propose his plan. My understanding is a $195 million plan, and that's ongoing expense. And I think myself and most Republicans would agree that we want to make sure that there's measurable outcomes, that if we're going to invest $100 million or more into education, that we're going to get the return on our investment. And there's no doubt we need some reform in our schools. 1992, we were #1 in the nation for student achievement. We're now ranked 24th, 25th.
Yep.
So something has to change. But we don't want to simply throw more money at a system that's not working to our advantage. And so I applaud the governor for taking on this initiative to create a better education system and willing to put the funding in there to make it happen. We just need to make certain that this plan is going to be successful.
Senator Schneider, if we throw $200 million at the education budget, will that solve all the problems?
Well, just throwing it blindly at the budget, no, of course. It will only exacerbate problems. But to get back to the question of reform, I think we'll get something done this year.
Okay.
The governor's plan and Senator Cornbach's plan in the Senate both include mentoring components to them. They both include a minimum first-year starting salary component to them. So I think we'll be able to coalesce around something. I met with the Waukee School District Superintendent last Friday, or maybe it was this Monday. At any rate.
They all run together. When you've been at the Capitol that long.
Yeah. And I wanted to visit with him specifically about the reform plan. And I wanted to visit with them because they already have some kind of mentoring program in place similar to what the Democrats and the governor are proposing. And I wanted to see some student achievement data to let me know whether or not this is something that could actually be successful. And what I learned in meeting with him, and I have data on this that he sent me, is that the number of students in the Waukee School District who are on free and reduced lunch has been increasing. Now, normally, you would see the number of students in special ed increase also. It's usually a positive correlation. But instead, there's been a decrease in the number of students in special ed in Waukee. And student achievement levels have been increasing year after year. And they benchmark themselves against several other school districts, including some private schools, and they're performing very well, if not at the very top of the different measurements they use for their benchmark. So I think this is a program that has a chance of really working well for us, but we'll see.
In the final 2 minutes or so, just want to ask you guys, with this being your first year in the legislature, if there was one piece of legislation that you could get passed this year, your ideal piece of legislation, Senator Chapman, we'll start with you. What would that be?
It'd probably be to support the flat tax that has come out of the House. I think putting more money back in Iowans' hands improves the quality of life. It allows them to, it has a ripple effect, whether it be health care, being able to afford the insurance, or whatever it may be. I think it has a positive impact all the way around and would certainly help our economy here in Iowa.
Senator Schneider, if you could accomplish one thing this legislative session, what would that be?
It would be a super bill that incorporates tax reform and education reform and fixes everything.
Very nice.
Sweet.
Now, for the most important question of the hour, out of all the bills that died in the funnel last week, there was one important one that survived, and I want to get both of you gentlemen on the record about this. Bengal cats. Senate File 247. Iowans would be allowed to possess Bengal cats. Of everything that was discussed and everything that didn't make it out of the funnel, that one did. So where do you stand on Bengal cats? Should Iowans be allowed to have them?
Senator Schneider, what do you think?
I'm not a cat guy, so I'm probably not the best one.
It made it out of funnel, so it's probably going to come up on the Senate floor.
I suggest we do a study.
Okay.
Let's get a study together.
Okay.
Take a good couple years, few $1 million, and figure out what the right thing to do is for Iowans.
All right. You definitely know how to be a senator. I love it.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for stopping by.
Thank you.
It's been great.
Senator Jake Chapman, Senator Charles Schneider. Art, another great show. Thanks for being
Absolutely.
here.
Same with you, Kevin.
It was fun.
See you next week.
All right. Thanks for watching the Iowa Legislative Hour.